Welcome, Robbie. And hey, everybody. Yeah, let's dive into the prayer.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. And hello, Mr. Goldfish. Thank you for the clearing. So, at this time, inviting you to join in this prayer and invocation. We ask at this time for the loving presence of God, Creator, consciousness within and all around us, the power of the Most High to be here with us, to bring loving, joyful, peaceful, quantumous energy into this call, to this place, space, and time, that all who engage with this video, whether it's live or as a recording, everyone who engages with Meredith's channel as well as mine, may they receive blessings as a result of this call. May they receive downloads, epiphanies, insights. May they receive the understanding and knowledge they need at this time upon their path to take the next steps forward, to deepen into love and truth. Aho.
Oh, yes. Okay. Hello, everybody. We've got a new moderator helping out, not new to my channel, but Terry Lee. Thank you so much for being here, my dear. And yeah, let's get to it. So today's podcast is on courage. What would you like to say about this? I'm loving this series. We did truth. Go check that out if you haven't seen it. We moved into honesty. That one really good. I loved that one. And now we're getting into courage. So, what does courage have to do with truth and honesty?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Meredith, for the continued invitation to be here and share with you and your audience. And yeah, we talked, like you said, about truth and honesty. And for those that are perhaps watching this for the first time or tuning into this series for the first time, we are going through a 7-part series. And these are through 7 teachings or 7 principles that create a good way of living, that they create a spiritual way of life. They allow us to live love, is what my elder has taught me, is that these teachings are living love. And that's really, for, I know Meredith and I have talked about this at different moments when we spent time together around spirituality being a lived experience, that we're here to be human. And the metaphysical things and all the beautiful aspects of spirituality that we love, if they don't practically apply to our life, what are we really doing, right? If they're not causing us to be better, more integrated, loving, joyful, peaceful human beings that are making the world a more wonderful place, then is it really spirituality, or is it just some illusion of ego gratification, through crystals or cards or talking to aliens or whatever things people do to get away from reality? Nothing wrong with those things.
I feel targeted.
I'm talking to you, Meredith. No, but you're living it, right? Like, it's like you can use those things to contribute to our life.
Right. They're not the be all end all.
Yeah.
Right.
Like we talked
I resonate with all sorts of things. We are infinite beings. As creator beings, when we come into alignment, we have a little bit of everything. We're made up of all of it, right? Because we are it all. Yeah. Anyways, okay.
Yeah. And it's like if you're calling on these energies and using these tools to say, how can I face reality and face truth,
Right.
especially those that we don't want to look at, and how can I become a more loving, service-based, integrated, honest, truthful human being, then those tools are wonderful. However, they can also be used to just escape reality, right? That rather than going into ourself, people sometimes want to leave and go up and be disembodied. And
Yeah,
that's
or
one of
control others with anything, that's one of
right.
the big ones, is like the control paradigms. When I think of courage, I really think of courage hallmarking knowing what's right, because we're in alignment with truth and we are honest with ourselves about whether what we're engaging in or witnessing or experiencing is true. And so when we're honest about that, sometimes it demands courage to be that one guy that stands up and says, no, I'm not going to align with this. I think that's one of the most embodied things because, we're taught to behave, we're taught to be seen and not heard, we're taught to conform. But sometimes when what is that? When you're born into a world where you don't belong, you're born in to change it. I'm a little bit of a renegade because I really trust my core and I don't want to stand for things that are dishonoring. And it's not about pride, it's not about ego. And that's where the discernment, that honesty, and that baseline with connection to source seems to come in for me is, I'm very conscientious about not doing things because I'm trying to power trip or be that way. I was immature, I was a kid once, and I did go through a phase where I learned it doesn't feel good to push my will into the world in a way that oversteps. I've become much more sensitive. And so for me, courage really is having the courage not to be in fear. And when I feel like I'm like going too much, I ask myself, what am I afraid of? And then I tap into real courage because I know what my deeper drivers are. So yeah, we could say so many things are courageous, but it could also be just championing our own ego, right? What do you think about all that?
Yeah, so when we talk about courage in the context of these teachings, to remember that the teachings, that the 7 teachings that we're moving through, each one kind of is a fractal of the other, and each one feeds into the other. And they're not necessarily linear. However, each one is in place for a reason, that we start with truth to anchor ourselves in truth and God, to know God, to then move into honesty as the space of living that truth. And to be courageous, in for the spoiler alert, the next part in the series is going to be bravery. So
Okay.
the next teaching is bravery, and a lot of people say, oh, truth and honesty, aren't they the same thing? Isn't that pretty much the same? And if you watch those videos, you'll see, well, actually no, they're quite different. They're similar
Right.
but quite different. And the same with courage and bravery. People often say, oh, isn't that the same thing? And it isn't.
Right.
And there's distinctions in it. So in the context of courage, in this way of thinking, in this format, it's about the inner world. It's about our inner experience.
Mm,
So courage is about facing and being honest and truthful about our shadows and our
mm,
fears. So courage is a lot around shadow work. It's a lot around looking into the shadows, facing the fear,
uh,
shining that beautiful light of truth inward. And
it,
there's a sorry, go ahead.
oh, no, you go ahead. Keep going. I
And
like where you're going with it.
so the teachings actually correspond with the medicine wheel. So the medicine wheel is a map to understand how we relate to the different aspects of ourself and the universe in Native American traditions. All traditions have some sort of wheel that they work with. In this context, the medicine wheel, and the courage is in the west, and the west is where the sun sets. It's where things start to get dark, where we have to face our darkness, where things go to die in the west is what is said to be the West, that the Western direction,
Mm,
someone's dying or a part of ourself is dying, they're
right.
facing the Western direction. And the color of the West is generally black or a very dark blue, like dark ocean blue. And it represents that darkness of the setting sun and the darkness that certain experiences of transformation bring us into, like a seed that needs to be put in the earth to germinate in the darkness. So courage, there's a lot of ripeness that can come from courage. There's a lot of
Mm,
fertility in courage to grow a new version of ourselves and to be
mm,
reborn. And it takes a lot of courage to do that. It takes a lot of
mm,
courage to stand in truth. It takes a lot of courage to be honest. It takes a lot of courage to stop blaming and playing the victim, right? And
right.
take responsibility for your life. It takes a
Mm.
lot of courage.
Yeah, I think humility is one of the most courageous things. I think I saw a post on your page. I don't know if I interacted with it, but it was something about surrender as a
Mhm.
partner, as a man, surrendering. And that must take a lot of courage. Could you tell me a little bit about courage in that context?
Yeah. So surrender is a teaching that is really found in all these seven teachings. It's a universal principle, and surrender is in its essence about letting go and letting go of control. Letting go of the grasping. Like the ego loves to grasp onto people, places, things, situations. The ego loves to try to control, and surrender is about letting go of control. And that act is very courageous because the ultimate surrender, from my viewpoint, is death. That's the
Hmm.
ultimate surrender because that's the ultimate letting go. You're not just letting go of your body, you're letting go of your emotions, you're letting go of your mind because your spirit is releasing. You're letting go of everything and everyone when you die, like physically die.
Do we need courage if that is an involuntary act?
Yeah, we do because the masters say that all
Shavasana
yeah,
as
it's like
well, right?
all of the spirituality is to prepare us for death. I
Hmm.
mean, that's a very Buddhist perspective that so much of the spiritual path is to prepare us for death so we can have an auspicious death to
Hmm.
then move on into higher realms or in other contexts to be able to reincarnate in a more auspicious way to a better life,
Okay, yeah.
better pastures or whatever. And that when you die with fear and resistance, generally that leads to a less auspicious death because you're going to be grasping and holding on. When you die, your whole job is just let go, let go, let go. Like let go of people. You can't save them. If you hold on to the people, that's what makes someone into a ghost. If you hold
Hmm.
on to this world, that's what makes people into ghosts. So if you don't have courage ingrained into your emotional body and into your mental
Hmm.
body and into even your physical body, because your cells can understand these teachings, then when you die, then that fear will control you.
I want to talk about the many cycles within our life where we experience the courage to die and be reborn. That surrender in relationship. Tell me what it feels like to be a man surrendering in relationship.
Yeah, I'd love to. So it's like a mini death, right? That's what sparked the whole idea of death is like in the moment of surrendering, it's like we put our ego aside and that moment is like a miniature death. So for me, surrendering in relationship often comes back to what you pointed out, the teaching of humility, that usually we need to surrender in relationship when there's either a conflict, like there's some sort of conflict or energetic, like there's a disharmony, because if you're in a state of surrender already, then there's not. But then if you need to surrender, there's often conflict. So the conflict, it's like letting go of the need to be right, letting go of the need to be in control, and coming back to my own self and taking responsibility for whatever is going on in my inner world and surrendering to my higher guidance of like, who am I? Like, how am I showing up in this moment and who do I want to be? So am I in integrity or out of integrity? Where have I slipped? Where have I forgotten truth? And the courage to face that. And that act for me is a state of surrender, of like letting go and allowing. Or when I'm around my beloved and she's like in her energy of like bigness, that energy is often more powerful because a woman is 13 times more powerful. And when I say bigness, I don't mean like in a volatile bigness and just like the expression of the feminine, and like the feminine energy is big, it's strong, it can be
Hmm.
very powerful and beautiful and also humbling for men because it's,
Hmm.
from my experience, the female is more powerful because she brings life into
Hmm.
the world. So in that moment, sometimes it can bring stuff up around us where it's like, whoa, I'm not in control, like moving down a river that's got rapids. And it's like, if you try to fight it,
Mm.
you'll just get knocked off the boat. But if you can actually surrender to it and get in the flow of it, then it'll carry you on this beautiful, epic, fun adventure. And the feminine can be similar. If we resist, that's when it cuts off the flow of energy and we try to control it through the resistance. And then that often creates conflict and tension. So is this making sense?
It
Kind
is.
of like
I'm looking for an example. I'm trying to formulate a question to get in there to see what what's on the other side when you've been courageous in that way. I'm curious to know if you can recall an example of pushing through that moment of courage beyond your comfort zone or be into that surrender, how that has added blessing, benefit, value to the connection that you are referencing, and what that can look like.
yeah, it's a good question. So for me, it's shown up in different situations throughout my life where it's this surrender of the need to be right in a conflict and the need to be in control. And I find that, like, I don't know if this is true for all men. I can only speak from my own experience that every time I've gotten into, like, with any woman that I'm, especially a woman I'm intimate with in my life, whenever I've gone tit for tat, like kind of like trying to be right or whatever and try to show her how she's wrong or whatever, like she always is better at it than me. Like I always like it just gets worse and worse. And like my hardness in that moment of like harshness or
Mm.
hardness or like stubbornness, she'll just mirror it back times 10, and then she'll get hardened. And when a woman gets hardened, like a woman in
Mm.
her feminine energy is meant to be soft, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
making love to a woman, she's all hard and constricted, then it's like not a good for anyone. It doesn't feel good. She's kind of like her body's not saying yes. So her body is holding tension that doesn't say, yes, I'm here to receive you. It says, I don't trust you. I don't feel safe. So when you're making love with a woman, when she feels safe and in her feminine, she relaxes and she's soft. And that makes for great lovemaking, as we know. So
Mm.
in like those dynamics, the moment that I just like let go of my need to be right, let go of my need to be in control, surrender myself, have the courage to let go of all that and just be like, you know what? I'm going to be a man and take responsibility for whatever is going on. And that might mean walking away for a bit or taking some time to breathe. However, I need to own my inner world and regulate myself and then come forth with self responsibility and accountability for how I've maybe been out of integrity or,
Yeah.
and then she'll soften.
I love that you're not afraid of death, right?
Mhm.
Because you're willing to walk away. You're willing to ground. You're willing to take a pause. Even that pause, sometimes when we're afraid of death, we keep going, right? And we don't take that break, that little death in there. Um, I can't get it out of my mind that actually the male orgasm is called petit mort, the little death, right? I
Mm.
keep hearing that in my head, and I think that's so interesting with that masculine feminine thing going on even in lovemaking, that little death the feminine has. I think of the masculine energy as a solar, an annual energy, very um, patient and larger capacity, the feminine as a monthly cycle, but then we have the petit mort also is a very quick cycle. But with with the courage, the feminine really does experience 2-week cycles and then that monthly cycle. And we're going through a birth, death, rebirth. Like we really get put through the ringer with hormones every single month. And we have to surrender. If we don't, it's a bumpy ride, and it's really interesting how I think that actually does lend itself in some ways to being a mother and being able to handle some of the stresses of life. It's a pretty neat dynamic. There are so many cycles and deaths and things that we relate to in seasons and as people. That courage is so interesting. But yeah, I think when we're in a dynamic where there's intimacy and we're trying to bring progress and grow together, not being afraid of pausing. I think that's one of the best things we can do is be present and have the courage to trust the connection, trust ourselves, and have that humility when we feel it's something escalating, going down the wrong way, just to surrender to that. I know in the community that I speak to quite a bit, it is about the patience, mostly for the feminines waiting, on this becoming. And it's true for all people, though, having the courage to wait for the good things take time, and to allow for the ego death over and over again on the path of alignment and relating and deepening intimacy. There's so many blind spots and things that we think we're further ahead with, and different layers, emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, that play out. And each one in turn has to have these little death moments where we release the old version of self. I know in some of the times that I've really moved through rapid change, I've even invoked loosely the concept of like snake medicine, where you're just shedding the skin. Something isn't a fit, we just shed the skin. Like we're moving through layer after layer after layer. And we can call on those kind of things for examples as to how we can process and navigate death like that too.
And the snake is such a beautiful example of surrender and courage, because the snake, as it sheds its skin, it becomes like the skin covers its eyes and it becomes
Hmm.
in darkness.
Oh,
It's very
interesting. Yeah.
vulnerable, right? Like in the shedding of the skin, there's these moments for nature that are so vulnerable. It's like the snake can't see, it doesn't have full control over itself, it's shedding its skin. And yet the snake, it sheds all of its skin at once. So it's not this idea of like letting a little bit go here and a little bit go there. It's like shedding a whole identity all at
Yeah.
once. So it's very efficient.
Yeah. I'm just thinking of all of the rites of passage that we go through as humans, as development, like the cutting of the birth, the cutting of the umbilical cord, all of that. When you were saying how the feminine is so much bigger than the masculine, I sometimes am just amazed at how we all have a mom and we were all, in that gestation. Our mother was like God, right? Omnipresent, omnipotent. Like we were saturated in our mother's energy. And that is such a psychological and subconscious hold on all of us. Our mothers are the Freudian stuff about mothers. It's the biggest deal ever because, we were enveloped completely by our mother. And I
Mhm.
think that's why the mother is so important, and or why the feminine has such a psychological power over the masculine. And I think a lot of women don't, or feminines don't understand that, how much our energy affects men, and how potent that really is, how important we really are. Because, on the planet, we've gone through a lot of barbaric stuff, and the patriarchal swing. I don't blame the patriarchy. I see that as a symptom of an imbalance. I don't point the finger at the patriarchy, it's all energy. But I do feel like the return to equality and equanimity, really, there's a lot of women, feminine energies that don't understand their worth, that don't understand their value and their potency that way. We're so significant. What do you think about that as a man dealing with women and having a history with relationships and all of that, when when somebody doesn't know their worth, when a partner doesn't know their worth and they're in fear, what is it like to tap into courage in those moments and hold space for that?
Yeah, it's what comes to mind is compassion, like the courage to have compassion and compassion for someone suffering, and also sometimes compassion can be fierce too, and speaking the truth of what we might see in that moment, because it's like if someone's stuck in that low self-worth and stuck in a victim consciousness, then it doesn't serve to try to save them or to caretake them. However, we can lift them up too and support them. So it's always this nuance. That said, in my own experiences of struggling with self-worth, it's always related to being disconnected from truth.
Mm.
Like if we're really grounded in truth, when we're really grounded in consciousness and connected to our true self, then there's not like, what do we have to feel unworthy about? How can we
Mhm.
feel like we're less than when we're
Yeah.
tapped into that source? So it's that disconnection from truth that really then requires the courage to face that. And that's really what courage is, from my experience, is like looking within at all the places that were separate from truth and separate from God, and being willing to see that, being willing to face it, being willing to go spelunking, like going into the inner caves and like exploring, and you don't know what kind of monsters or
Mm.
what might be in there, but you're willing to go and shine the light of truth.
How do you feel that people can remind others that give and take when we see somebody that's not in the truth like that, and um, is how can we compassionately remind and support? I'm thinking on this human level of giving and receiving. What are some good ways when we're around somebody and they're not in the truth in whichever direction?
Mhm.
Do you think that there's an opportunity to really support in a healthy way? Where does courage factor in? Courage
Mhm.
to let them deal with it on their own? Or how do we know with discernment and sovereignty what a good way of handling that is
Mhm.
through communication? What do you
Yeah,
think?
for me, I think we all have to find our own way with that, because we all have different medicine and we all have different gifts. And we all have a different purpose too. Like some people's purpose is to be more like in your face and just like calling people out, or, speaking truth that's hard to hear. Some people's purpose is to be more like soft or gentle, or lend an ear, or whatever it might be. However, for me, I feel like the best way is to offer a loving reflection, to be like, hey, are you open to a reflection? Because you want to have permission. And often it's a yes. And then, hey, I'm noticing, I see that you're showing up in this way, and how I perceive it is that you're in a space of disempowerment, or that you're falling into some victim energy or some powerlessness, and perhaps you've forgotten truth, and whatever that reflection
Mm.
might be, and shining some light on it. And they'll do with it as they will, like some people will take it and have the courage to look within and see themselves, and some people won't. Some people will reject it or push it away. And I've found that it's also dependent on where people are at in their consciousness. Like sometimes when people are in that really dark place, like I was recently with a man who was in a very dark place, and when like I was speaking these things to him and just saying like, hey, this is what I'm seeing, and like, remember who you are, and this is, remember truth and the creator, and God stops our world because he wants us to look his way and talk to us. So I was kind of sharing these teachings, and I could see as I was sharing them how not receptive he was to it. However, he wasn't like he was open to a degree, but like his body language, his demeanor, like he was like I said it, and then it was just you could just sense like that his ego doesn't want to hear that. His ego was stuck in the victim negative energy, and he wants someone that's gonna placate his story. However, I'm not gonna do that because it's boring. Drains your energy. That said, like when someone's in that low state, sometimes what they need to be more receptive to truth is that they need their energy level to get raised up because they're in such a dense, heavy place. So sometimes that's where they need someone to just listen to their problems or tell
Mhm.
them you're not a bad person, like kind of lift them up and maybe placate a little bit and help them lift their energy level up. And then they're more receptive to truth.
I think also what I'm getting is, a lot of feminine energy doesn't have the courage to actually say when they're seeing something. I think a lot of the experience in working with people over these years has shown me that there's a hesitancy for the feminine to initiate a conversation about things when it seems to be going sideways, when their partner or their loved one is demonstrative or acting out in some way and not a balanced way. There has been I personally do not identify in this way, but I see it very commonly where the feminine is reluctant to say anything because they feel like they are at fault or they've done something wrong and they don't know where to start that conversation. Do you have any suggestions as a man and with approachability, how a feminine could have the courage to open that conversation? What would work in those times if they notice their partner or loved one is acting uncharacteristically or um, even pointing the finger at them or something, how they could go about with courage
Hmm.
investigating what's going on there in an honoring way?
Yeah. Well, first is getting some clarity. Like when these dynamics are happening in any relationship, it's a co-creative process. And at least from my experience, there's always it's kind of like if you have charge around something, then there's something for you to look at. If you're totally neutral, then there's no problem in talking about it because you're fine. It's like I'm
Mhm.
just seeing you go a bit crazy here and like off the deep end, and I'm just like fine in my own space because I don't have any resonance with this. But then usually if there's that much unresonance, then you're probably not going to be resonant enough to be together. So usually there's shared karmas. And then
Yes.
so in that moment, even if it's, it might not be 50-50, it doesn't have to be, it can be out of proportion. That said, to sit with your own self and get clarity first, to be like, what is this bringing up in me? What am I experiencing? What is my place in it? And get some clarity. It's always important, or it just kind of makes confusion and chaos.
Yeah.
And then it's really important in relationship to have conscious spaces that are consistent, consistent spaces for conscious communication. It's like a relationship is a living garden, a living being that we need to tend to. And if we neglect it, the emotional part of it, then it will wither and it won't thrive. So every relationship should have spaces for conscious connection, whether it's once a week or every day or however, you get to choose, but it needs to be there
Hmm.
so that these things become normal to talk about when it's
Right.
charged or when it's not charged,
Yeah,
and
that's an excellent point. So, how do we work safety in communication in from the beginning? I think it takes courage to not carpet sweep when we start, getting to know somebody. And there's these little remarkable, like, oh, I wonder why they didn't say more there. Or, yeah, we have to be truthful and honest with ourselves. It brings it back to that, right? And sort of
Mhm.
impeccable with our housekeeping. I don't think that anybody can be perfect, but there is something to be said with that personal accountability to be genuine, to be honest, to be in alignment, to
Mm.
be truth. When that's there, we don't have any issues with um, being courageous and present. Courage is a very present thing, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, for sure. And I think like in the beginning, like people just kind of, and I know I have many times, is like we stumble into relationships and we forget that like this is one of the biggest decisions you're going to make in your life.
Yeah.
You know, it's like it's not a small thing. But we just stumble into them. We just like we don't really think about it. We're not like, "Oh, wow, this could be my future wife or husband," and, like, I might spend, a good portion of my time with this human being. Like, maybe I
Right.
should do some vetting here and, like, really
Yeah.
understand who they are and share my hard truths and be really vulnerable and ask some hard questions of them to be like, what is their character? How do they navigate conflict? Like,
Yeah.
what are they able to take responsibility? And am I able to share my vulnerability and be well received in it?
I think the
So
hookup culture has made a lot of um, relationships happen in unexpected ways. Yeah, I
mhm,
think there's something huge to be said for the courage to take things slow and
mhm,
to really get to know people with this enough spaciousness to really see. I channel my inner David Attenborough quite often because I will be like, the divine feminines or the divine masculines in their natural environment, habitat, or whatever. And I think there's something to be said for not, ha- you know, necessity aside, there are lots of beautiful, compassionate things that human beings do to support and have that resilience and band together and do what's needed. So I'm not saying that's inappropriate, but rushing commitment stages or rushing in when we're 80% sure about a connection, and hoping for the best and trying our best, yes. But if we slow right down and only progress when we're on a sure footing, right? There's something so beautiful for that. I think that takes a lot of courage. I feel like a lot of feminine energies want to have that security, want to have that safety of a commitment, and then it's like focused on getting that or having a child or those animal things like protect me, commit to me, have a child with me, all that stuff. And there needs to be so much more grounding. It needs to be courage coming in to take it slow, to make a good choice. I actually see human beings as coming out of a survival mode and barbaric time on the planet where we had to kind of safety in numbers. And now I love the dialogue going on around the planet with the internet and with these conscious conversations and conscious relationships and people really bringing spirit and that alignment into relationships. We haven't really had the luxury of that. We've had little pockets of people separated by great land masses, and we're trying to do our best to make do and perpetuate the species. Now we've got this luxury of choosing a partner from all over the world. We could literally meet anybody on the other side of the planet and form a relationship and find true connection that way. It's a magnificent time to be alive for real connection and real relationship. And I think so. Yeah, our animal self or our survival mode self, we get into relationships so quickly. We find attraction and we go towards it. It's built into us. And I think there is something also to have the courage to not get into a relationship before we do know people well enough to justify it. It is a huge life decision. I would love to see it be seen as such. We all maybe think we are that way, but
mhm.
yeah.
Or at least like at the very least, being clear on your intentions for your life. Like,
Yes.
I think that's often like people are so lost and without purpose that they kind of meander through life and
Ooh.
then end up in relationships without really knowing what their intention is. Like, it's okay to be like, my intention is just to have fun with this person and like, I'm not
Yes.
interested in a serious thing. If that's your intention, then speak it, be really clear about it. I'm
Yes.
here to get to know you, have fun, have some laughs, maybe make some love, and I'm not really interested in much more, and that's how I'm showing up. If that's how it is, then speak it. Or if you're like, I'm here because I'm looking for my person, and I'm
Yes.
serious here, and I want to walk with someone through life, and you may or may not be that person, then be transparent about it. Because
Yeah.
then that
It
person,
takes courage
yeah,
to speak that out, right? Because people wear so many masks and they have so many reasons for keeping that on the down low, what their
hmm
agenda is, or they may even not they may think they're clear and they may not know their subconscious drivers or
hmm
their fears until they're in a circumstance where that comes to light, which is
hmm
also a beautiful, beautiful thing. We have to have unconditional love for ourselves and others, just trying our best out there.
hmm yeah,
But attraction doesn't lie. I think um, the courage to understand where the attraction we have for certain people is, though, because it's a broad spectrum. I do a lot of analogy with the sacral chakra, which is our spiritual sexual chakra. And we can have attraction that's spiritual, we can have attraction that's sexual, and we can be confused about which is which or what parts are and aren't those things. And that is a fascinating study because attraction is how do I even begin on this? Um, we sexualize a lot because there's a lot of sexual repression. So a lot of genuine attraction is sexualized and there's sexual tension and it's taboo and we're not allowed to like talk to somebody that's a potential threat to a relationship, those kinds of things, because when we're attracted there's a sharing of energy. It's a vast topic. I'm trying to even find some coherence in this topic, but even having the courage to understand there's more than one kind of attraction. We can be drawn, but asking ourselves, what is this attraction I'm feeling? A lot of times we are experiential beings and we don't know until after the fact what the reasons were. If we're talking about karmic connections, we get into those faster than we can say help. And then we get ourselves out over a longer period of time. And we had to learn that lesson with that person and the courage to release ourselves from it. If we find that it's not honoring. There's courage comes in so many times, going into things, coming out of things. We have to have courage at all times. It also brings in that sovereignty. So what did humility, presence, sovereignty? Because courage is something, like you said, it's internal, so it's ours.
hmm
Yeah, it's ours. It feels like a highly personal aspect when we're talking about courage and bravery.
hmm
I don't want to get too much into the bravery, but courage really does feel like an internal experience.
hmm yeah, and
Permission,
yeah, like the
inner
courage,
permission.
yeah, permission and the courage to, it's like one of the things in relationship that is the hardest is being vulnerable, right? Being sharing our inner world, sharing vulnerably and speaking those things that we want to hide, those things we want to withhold, right? Because we're afraid that if we share that thing we're hiding, that thing we're ashamed of or judging within ourselves, that this person will judge it and reject us or not love us anymore or push us away. And
Yeah,
that's why we're hiding it to begin with. And that's the vulnerability, is instead of withholding, to reveal, and to know how to do that with grace. It's not just like a trauma dump. It's like how to share your inner world and reveal what's happening within yourself and the secret shames within your being from a place that's also truthful, right? That's
yeah,
not, as much as we can, and owning it. And then in that moment, that takes so much courage,
It
because
does.
it's like being naked on stage, you know? It's like being exposed. It's like walking down through Walmart totally butt naked. Like, it just wouldn't feel g it doesn't feel good. It's like, "Oh my god," but when you do it.
How do you know?
Yeah, those were other times. We won't talk about
Oh
it.
my goodness. Uh, yeah, when you were saying that, I was coming up, a memory was coming up for me when I was connecting with my dear love, and he was saying something that scared me. And that fear just overrode. If I could go back into the moment that I'm remembering at this time, I would have had courage. I would have, let me just feel into it for a second because, yeah, he said something. And because it wasn't straightforward and confident, I picked up on the fear. And it was a tentative thing that he was asking me. And there maybe was some bravery, but he wasn't empowered with that clarity and the courage to say it in a very, very clear way. And I remember thinking he was meaning the opposite of what he was actually saying because the courage was lacking. And so I felt rejected. I felt like it was a dismissal instead of seeing it for what it really was a tentative start on a very major topic. And so I assumed that what he was saying was the opposite of what I think he was saying now. And instead of holding my own and speaking my truth in that moment, I said something that I thought he wanted to hear, and I agreed with his fear or my assumption of what his fear was because I felt so bowled over by the the difficulty in what I was experiencing. My heart hurt, my stomach felt off, and that was a really important awareness for me to understand what my body felt like when I had an opportunity to see somebody bringing me energy that wasn't courageous or wasn't truthful or honest, or it was that in the center of it, it was emerging, but I mishandled it. And I feel because I mean, we all have personal accountability to be as truthful, honest, courageous as we can. But in that moment, if I could go back, I would have calmed myself. I would have had the clarity to express my truth on the matter very, very with transparency and not just reflect back the fear-based part. And that set up a wobble for months to come between us just with that one choice. And um, yeah, I feel like it's far more of a risk not to be courageous and to run the risk of not being popular in that moment, right? And to advocate for our truth,
Mhm,
especially with the ones that are closest to us and that matter so much.
mhm,
Our ego wants to say that's the riskiest to have the courage, but spirit wants to say that's the place to have the courage.
mm,
And that's a really human thing, it's so valuable
mhm, mhm,
to remember that it's a greater disservice not to have courage than to have courage.
mhm,
But it does require something of us. We have
mhm.
to put ourselves on the line. We have to risk it. But we have everything to gain when we do that.
Yeah, it's like, in that moment, courage does bring us into resonance with truth, because let's say, like, let's say there's something that, like, let's just say in relationships, something that can happen is you are attracted to another person, and this happens all the time to people, and it's not a matter of, like, it's a matter of what you do with it, right? So a lot of people, they feel an attraction, they're like, oh, like, that's outside, like, we're in a monogamous relationship, I shouldn't be doing this, or it's wrong, or it's bad, or like I don't want to share it because it might cause separation, so I'll just keep it to myself or whatever, right? And instead of just speaking it, they hold back and withhold. And then what happens is the partner starts to feel that withholding. And then right away, especially if you're a man doing it, because women are super duper psychic, and you just, even
Yep.
non-spiritual women are super psychic. It's just built into,
Women's intuition.
yeah, exactly. It's super powerful. God made women very powerfully. And so then that the woman or the other person will feel the withholding, and that will create distrust, and it'll create more and more separation. And then that will lead you to be more likely to actually pursue that person, because now there's separation, distrust, and that's going to detract from the intimacy and the separation, and there's going to be less sexual connection, or if it is, it'll be less juicy, and then that will lead the person to be more likely to actually do the thing they don't want to do, and then it all leads to the breakup. So if instead you just say, like, okay, I'm just going to tell this person this is what's happening, I'm attracted to this other person, well, then your partner will either receive that in a way that's loving, and they may have a reaction, but love is not getting stuck in the reaction. It's to be like, okay, I'm going to take responsibility, and then from there, hopefully there's resolution and healing, and there can be just an honest conversation of the humanness of it, and it's like, okay, what are you going to do about it now? You have this attraction, what's next? And then finding the leak in the relationship, like, because often that's what starts it, is there's some sort of leak or
Yeah.
separation that allows that energy to occur anyways.
Yeah,
'Cause we-
that's really interesting because I remember way back hearing that um, men cheat for the physical experience or just for sex, and that women cheat because of an emotional need.
Mhm,
Um, I don't know if that's a gross overgeneralization or if there's some merit in that, but what I hear from you as a man is that that would be an emotional um, ish imbalance as well in the relationship, and
mhm.
feeling that attraction to somebody. So yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it's like
it can go.
I've personally never cheated on a partner, so I can't
Mhm.
speak from my own experience. That said, I have had leaky energy before in relationship, and in those moments, it often is for a sense of validation.
Yeah,
You
it's
know?
interesting though, because I feel as though relationships that do, I'm not sure if I've had the awareness of too many successful relationships where I would say the people were meant to be together that have that leaky energy.
Mhm.
I really think true alignment doesn't have that leaky energy. And
Yeah.
if we choose relationships that are actually aligned for us, we don't. I've done a lot of thinking about jealousy, for instance, and I really think jealousy isn't a thing to condemn people for having. I think it's one of the indicators that we're misaligned with someone. If
Right.
we have jealousy, I feel like there's something going on there. Obviously, fear, and we need courage to look at it. Or if we are not feeling like we can be totally invested in a relationship, we also have to have courage to identify that within us. But I think that speaks of misalignment, and I feel like it indicates the tendency to settle or to not like to believe we won't find better or to get into something prematurely. And so for me, when I see that, I have to wonder if the couple is actually meant to be in that level of relationship with each other.
Mhm.
I think those kinds of things teach a lot about dynamics and alignment, but I think humans need to be collectively more courageous not to get into relationships that there is such a power struggle going on or a misalignment that it's that it's like that. I think we should wait as humans until we can, really align with
Yeah.
somebody.
And here's the thing, is the courage to face the truth of it. Like, I've been
Yeah,
in many relationships where it's no longer aligned, but I haven't had the courage to actually face that truth.
that's an important topic.
And
Yeah.
like, one of the best prayers you can make, if especially if you're just getting into a relationship with someone, and this is true of any endeavor really, is like, the path is to surrender to God's will, right? To align ourselves as much as we can with our highest timeline, which is God's will for us. God wants the best life for you. Like, God wants beautiful things for you. It's just our little free will, running renegade and doing what we want that gets us in trouble.
Right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. So when you're connecting to a person, let's say you just met someone, you just make this prayer. You say, Creator, and you do it from your heart with earnestness, and you have to be willing for the answer that you don't want.
Right.
And you say, Creator, if this, you know, in this case for me, I'm a man. So if this woman, if this person is for me, then bless it. May it be blessed. May it be so blessed, and may you show that. And if this person's not for me, then may you also bless it
Hmm.
so that I can move forward in my life. And you make that prayer and you make an offering and you give that to God, and within 4 days you'll get your answer. There'll be something that happens. It's not always black or white. You might have a conflict with the person, and then you have this beautiful resolution. You realize, like, whoa, this person's taking responsibility. I'm taking responsibility. We're working through this conflict in a really good way, and there's this beautiful new beginning. Or there might be signs from the universe. Or, I know I did this once where I was with a woman and I had already, gotten into it. I was deep in the relationship with her and I was starting to have doubts. And this was many years ago. And I made the offering, and it was, total chaos after the offering. She had this huge blowout and got really quite inflammatory and emotionally abusive. And I was like, shit, like, what do I do? Like, I'm already like so invested in this relationship. And at that time, I didn't have the courage to be
Yeah.
like, okay, the creator is blessing this. The creator is saying this isn't for me, and he's giving me his blessing by showing me her
Hmm.
true colors and how she is in relationship. And the best thing for me to have done at that time would have been to say, all the best to you, and this is not for me, and I'm going to move on with my life. It's inconvenient, it's annoying, but that's what would have served. But I didn't have the courage to listen.
Yeah.
Instead, I followed fear and said, you know what, I'll just keep going with this. And it ended up creating so much chaos, destruction. It was financially draining, it was emotionally draining. It taught me
We
some
get
really,
that karma.
yeah, it's like, it taught me some really valuable lessons about toxic, abusive, negative relationships and my own shadows in that, of like not setting boundaries and saying no and standing up for myself. That said, like, there's easier ways to learn that lesson. You can learn that lesson through love and grace. You don't have to learn through suffering and
Yeah.
negativity. So, at that time I didn't know courage, and so I struggled, and that's how I learned it. And eventually
Yeah.
I found the courage. So,
I mean, I think it's if we can be at a place where we can, have that truth and honesty with source to know what we're looking for before we, step out there into a relationship, because if we stumble into them, then we're just playing catch up, clean up to
mhm,
come out of them, and that's the way most of us do it. And the connection to source and higher power and that accountability is essential. But when we actually have that, we take it into consideration where we're at. We get that truth and that honesty between ourselves and source, and we can co-create what would be of benefit or blessing to have in a relationship. And we set that intention to actually call that in
mhm,
ahead of time consciously. Now we're able then to have that baseline so that as the relationship is developing, we can have that central column of accountability, and we can measure whether the things are progressing in alignment with what we're asking for. I think one of the biggest courageous things in this day and age is waiting, modest, not having sex right away.
Mhm.
That to me, there's something so much to be said for, and this is my opinion, may not be the views of all involved in this podcast, I'm not sure. But the way that I see it is that there's a reason that archetype of saving ourselves for marriage, which I have not done. However, I now see the benefit in it, having thrown myself into scenarios, relationships. And now where I'm at is I finally realized how beautiful that is to get to know somebody first and then consummate it with making love, the sexual act of consummation. Because what I've noticed is when we have sex with someone, that developmental stage, that level of knowing each other, that act of sealing the deal basically says this is the level of intimacy that I am willing to condone. This is the things I know, the things I don't know. This does it. And if we're not conscious about that, when we are intimate with somebody, it sort of keeps it at that developmental stage. It's very hard to the Holy Bible actually says that the one reason to cease having sex in a marriage is for spiritual prayer and meditation and focus. So we that shows me that when we are actively in a sexual relationship with someone, growth is pretty impossible while we're still focused in that intimacy. And we do have to step aside from that at times for growth if we're in a relationship that is the only time that we're meant to cease that kind of intimacy so that we can seek spiritual growth beyond some kind of a developmental stage in the relationship. But prior to coming into relationship, waiting to bring in the intimacy allows for that personal development to get to a place where there can be the accountability needed to have the truth, have the honesty, have the courage, and all of these things anchored in. Can you imagine a world where the children learn these pillars that we're talking about prior to coming into relationships, and that it's not a temptation or a pressure to to be in such a casual energy about sexuality. Sex is so sacred,
Mhm.
and the exchange that two people share in that is one of the most sacred things that we can possibly exchange with another. It, to me, the more I do this work, the more I see how essential it is to know how powerful the sexual energies really are and what that does within relationship and what that says about our own accountability within relationship. And so many times it just seems to be a immense amount of pressure to focus on the sexual aspects or the intimacy. Yeah, I know that was a bit long-winded, but what do you think about that genuinely?
Well, my time is coming to
Oh,
a
yeah, it
conclusion.
is.
Um, that said, I definitely agree with what you're saying. And
Yeah.
yeah, let's see, I'll close with some thoughts on it briefly. Um, yeah, the courage to say no, right? The courage to withhold that desire, so to speak, or not withhold it, but like be present until we're clear, until there's clarity. And the courage to do a lot of truth telling before that too, to like really show
Yeah.
ourselves and see who the other person is. And that's what comes through emotional intimacy, vulnerability, truth telling, revealing of our inner self. and being like, this is who I am. This is where I'm growing. This is what I'm struggling with. And do you want to accept me into your life, into your body? And, do I want to enter you, depending on the sex? And that intimacy, having the courage for that intimacy, then allows a space to then make that decision from a more truthful place where we know what we're getting ourselves into, because sexual energy, we start to exchange our energy and we start to take on the other person to a certain degree, and it's binding. It really binds us,
Yeah.
connects us, and then it's beautiful. It keeps a relationship together. However, it can also bind you to someone that may not really serve you.
Yeah.
So having the courage to really be like, this is who I am, and then having the capacity for the other person to meet you in that, and then know who they are as much as you can. I mean, you don't want to be too like anal about it, but it's also like, you got to find your way with it.
Yeah, I think self-love in this context is not anal. I think there's
Well,
so
I mean like in that of like it can become this thing like never it's never
a
good enough.
control. Yeah,
Yeah,
people
control. Yeah.
people will use so many things for controlled paradigms, but if we normalized as a society, I do think we're going to get there where it's not so much of a casual hookup culture like is out there on the streets.
Yeah.
It's a different thing. I think as we become more spiritually aware, as we affirm that
Hmm.
in fellow humans, there's going to be a lot more foundation coming in for legitimate relationships going forward. I think as a legacy on the planet, I think we're including spirit and that sacred aspect into relationship. I see it in the collective. Okay, I respect that we've gone a little bit over for your time schedule today. So
Yeah.
let's sign off, and thank you so much everybody for watching this today
Yeah.
and
Thank
joining
you.
us.
Thanks for the
Yeah.
opportunity to share. And yeah, please check out my channel and my
Yeah.
different offerings. Would love to keep connecting with whoever is here and enjoying this
Absolutely.
conversation.
Yeah, so much fun. And thanks, moderators. Have a great evening, everybody. Bye for
All
now.
right. Much love.